All stories posted on our channel are stories from our subscribers and created by us based on real events we've experienced and witnessed. We post new stories every day for your entertainment, that we hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
It started 3 weeks before Christmas. I came in from the cold, fingers raw from carrying 2 bags of groceries through a slushy driveway. In my head, I was still trying to be the guy who handled everything. Megan had asked for a few things. Cranberry sauce, heavy cream, those peppermint marshmallows the kids liked. I got all of it. Even grabbed an extra bottle of red wine, thinking we could open it tonight, light the tree, maybe pretend things were normal for a couple of hours. But as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. She had lit the balsam pine candle, that damn candle, the one she always reserved for December, the one that used to mean she was ready to play Christmas music and bake sugar cookies and hum around the kitchen like something out of a Hallmark movie. But now it smelled like cover-up. I stood there, snow dripping from my coat onto the hardwood, waiting for her to greet me. She was stirring something at the stove, eyes fixed on the pot like she was hypnotized by steam. "You okay?" I asked, voice low, careful. "Yeah, just tired," she said, not looking. Her tone was too even, like she'd practiced it, like she didn't want to say more because if she did, the truth would come out without her permission. I set the grocery bags down and walked into the kitchen. The soup smelled good, rich, herbaceous, but it felt like a distraction, like she was buying time. She finally glanced at me. "I talked to my sister today." My stomach tightened. That wasn't a normal opener. "Oh?" I said. "How's Olivia?" "She and Josh are going to his family's cabin for Christmas this year, in Vermont." I nodded, cautiously. "Okay." She kept stirring. "And my mom, well, she wants to do something smaller. Just the girls." I blinked. "What do you mean, just the girls?" She paused. That was the moment, right there, when she put the spoon down and turned to me, arms crossed, like she needed them to hold her up. "I'm not spending Christmas with you this year," she said. "The kids and I are going to Mom's." My mind went blank for a second. I genuinely thought I misheard. "Come again?" She didn't flinch. "We need a break. It's just for a few days. I want the kids to have a peaceful Christmas." That word, peaceful, hit like a slap. "So I'm the chaos?" I asked. "No," she said, too quickly. "It's not about blame." I stepped back, voice rising a little. "You're telling me after 10 years of Christmas mornings, of building this life, I'm not invited to the next one?" "I didn't say you weren't invited," she said quietly. "I said we're not doing it with you." Same thing, different wrapping. I turned and walked toward the hallway, grabbing my coat from the hook. I needed air, or maybe I just needed distance. My head was buzzing, ears hot, throat tight. She didn't follow. And I didn't say much, just one word, really. So, I didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't ask questions she already had answers to but wouldn't give. Just walked out the door, letting the cold slam into me like a wall. The air outside was brutal, one of those early December nights where the wind slices right through your jeans and leaves. The Christmas lights on the houses down the street blinked cheerfully, completely indifferent to my unraveling. A plastic Santa on the Johnsons' porch grinned at me like he knew something I didn't. I sat in the truck with the engine off, watching my breath fog up the windshield. I didn't cry. I wasn't sad yet. I was stunned. We weren't a perfect couple. God, we weren't even a good on social media couple. But I thought we had the unspoken agreement of long-haul people. Stay the course. Survive the ruts. Try again in January. That's what marriage was, wasn't it? Apparently not. Apparently, there was a threshold, an invisible line Megan had drawn somewhere behind the balsam candle and the soup, and I'd crossed it without even knowing. I called my brother, Mark. He answered on the second ring. "What's up?" he said, casual. "Megan just told me they're doing Christmas without me." Silence. Then, "Shit, yeah. You want to come up here? I mean it. Bring your stuff. You can stay with us for the holiday. Em and the kids would love it." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't appreciate it. I just didn't want to make a decision yet. My house, our house, was only 20 feet away, but it already felt like a motel I forgot to check out. "I'll think about it," I said. When I walked back in, the soup was gone from the stove. She'd put it in the fridge, cleaned the counter, turned off the candle. The house smelled like nothing. I didn't say a word, just walked past her and dropped onto the couch, jacket still on. My hands felt like static. She didn't speak either. Went upstairs. I heard the creak of the bedroom door. Then, silence. At 2:30 a.m., I was still on the couch, watching the tree blink at me in red and gold. Our daughter Mia's angel ornament hung lopsided. Our son Caleb's pinecone reindeer looked like it had been through war. I had helped them make both, and now I wouldn't see them open presents, because their mom needed a break from me. That was the night everything shifted, not because of a blow-up. There was no fight, no accusations, just absence. Her absence. The kind that starts in the eyes, then the tone, then the room, and now, apparently Christmas. I realized something while sitting there, legs numb under a throw blanket I didn't remember buying. Love doesn't always leave with slamming doors. Sometimes it just lights a candle, stirs the soup, and tells you you're not part of the holiday, and that's worse. Because it's quieter, and you can't argue with silence. The morning after Megan told me, I woke up with my back stiff and a headache that wasn't from alcohol, but from the kind of sleep you get when your mind refuses to shut off. The couch creaked beneath me as I sat up. The Christmas tree still blinked its red and gold routine, mocking, or worse, indifferent to me. I hadn't even taken my shoes off the night before. One had dropped on the floor, the other still half on. I pulled it off and stared at it like maybe it held some answer I'd missed. Megan was already up. I heard the kettle whistle and the soft clink of mugs. She moved around the kitchen quietly, polite, detached, like I was a guest she hadn't invited but didn't have the energy to ask to. I stood, stretched, walked slowly toward the kitchen, half waiting for her to say something. She didn't. She poured tea into her mug and added the exact amount of honey she always did. 2 teaspoons, stirred clockwise. She used to hum while doing it. This time, nothing. I cleared my throat. She looked up. You want coffee? Sure. She poured without meeting my eyes, set it on the counter like a hotel concierge. You sleep okay? She asked, voice neutral. No. She nodded like she expected that. No apology, no me neither. Just moved past it like it didn't matter. I made a list for the kids, she said. Packing stuff, what clothes to bring, favorite snacks, toothbrushes, Mia's inhaler. And I'm on that list where exactly? Now she looked at me, not angry, just resigned. I didn't think you'd want to be involved. You didn't ask. You left. You told me I wasn't part of Christmas. She took a sip of her tea and turned away. There it was again, that silence. The kind that didn't just fill a room, it changed it. I leaned against the counter and stared at her back. I'm their dad, Megan. I know. I have every right to spend Christmas with them. You do. So? She sighed, setting her mug down with just a little too much force. This isn't about rights, Jace. It's about what kind of holiday this is going to be. And right now, you and I together, that's not exactly peaceful. She had weaponized the word again. Peaceful. You mean I'm the problem? No. I mean we are. And I'm removing half of that equation for a few days. And the kids just go along with that? They're excited to see my mom. Olivia's kids will be there. It'll be fun. Without me, they'll be fine. That stung more than I expected. Not because it wasn't true, but because of how casually she said it. Like my presence didn't factor into their happiness. Like I'd already been replaced by cousins and cranberry sauce. I pushed away from the counter and walked into the hallway. I didn't slam the door behind. I didn't yell. I just left the room, because staying felt like standing still while a fire burned. The rest of the day was a series of half-hearted attempts to pretend life hadn't just split down the middle. I did laundry, took out the trash, checked work emails I didn't care about, folded clothes that smelled like her dryer sheets, watched the neighbor's dog take a dump on our lawn for the 3rd day in a row, and didn't even bother shooing him away. Everything was normal, and nothing was. I kept thinking about how easy it had been for her to say it. We're not doing Christmas with you this year, like she was canceling a reservation, like it wasn't a brick to the chest. I looked around the house and started seeing it differently. The pictures on the walls, family vacations, school plays, birthday parties, suddenly looked like exhibits in a museum curated by someone who no longer believed in the subject. One photo in particular stopped me. It was from Christmas 3 years ago. Megan, me, Mia, and Caleb sitting on the living room floor, all in matching pajamas, covered in wrapping paper and joy. Megan was leaning into me. Her eyes were laughing. Where the hell did that woman go? That night, the kids came home from school buzzing with holiday energy. Mia, who was 9 going on 17, talked a mile a minute about her class Christmas party and how the cafeteria cookies tasted like sweet drywall but had sprinkles, so it's fine. Caleb, 5, had a candy cane stuck in his hair and was completely I tried to act normal. I hugged them tight, asked about their day, listened to their stories. But I couldn't stop looking at Megan. She stood behind them, arms crossed, smiling in all the right places, laughing at the right moments. But her eyes never softened. After dinner, I pulled Mia aside in the hallway. I crouched to her level. Hey, so, Christmas is coming up. She nodded excitedly. We're going to Nana's. I know. That'll be fun. I smiled, though it felt forced. You looking forward to it? She hesitated, just a beat. Then she nodded again. Yeah, I guess. You guess? She looked down. Are you coming? No, baby. Not this year. Oh, just that. Oh, like a quiet realization that the world was changing and she wasn't being given a say. I ruffled her hair. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, she whispered. Then she ran off, as kids do, because that's how they survive. Movement over mourning, distraction over depth. I didn't sleep that night either. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling while Megan slept soundly beside me, or at least pretended to. At some point around 2 a.m. I whispered, Is there someone else? No reply. I wasn't even sure I meant it. I didn't think she was cheating, not in the traditional sense. But she'd left me all emotionally, spiritually. What was physical betrayal compared to that? She didn't answer, and that told me enough. The next morning, I booked a rental cabin, just outside of town, in the woods. Far from blinking lights and inflatable Santas and peppermint marshmallows, I told myself it was just to clear my head, maybe do some writing, think. I didn't tell Megan until the night before she and the kids were scheduled to leave. I'm not going to Mark's, I said. I got a cabin. I'll be out of the house for the week. She nodded, not surprised. Probably best, she said. No fight, no concern, not even a question. I stood there for a moment, wanting her to say something, anything. Ask if I'd be alone. Ask if I'd be okay. But she just kept brushing Mia's hair and told Caleb to put on socks. So I walked away, again. And I started to wonder how many times you could walk away from someone before you just stopped turning back. I didn't realize how loud a house could be until I packed my duffel bag and left mine behind. Not loud with people or arguments or footsteps. Loud with everything that wasn't happening. Loud with all the conversations we weren't having. All the small moments that used to mean something, but now only reminded me of what had cracked between us. The morning Megan left with the kids, the sky had that bleak December look. You know the one. That pale, washed-out gray that doesn't even bother pretending the sun might show up. She loaded their bags into the SUV while I stood on the porch like a guest at my own goodbye party. Caleb waved from his booster seat. Bye, Daddy. Bye, buddy. Mia gave me a smaller wave, hesitant, like she was afraid her mother might interpret it as betrayal. I hated that hesitation. I hated that she felt she had to choose who to comfort. Megan didn't look at me when she shut the trunk. Drive safe, I said. Yeah, you too. At the cabin. No kiss, no hug, no Merry Christmas. Just the unmistakable finality of a car door closing. As they rolled down the driveway, I swear I felt the house exhale, like it had been holding its breath, waiting for someone to leave. Or maybe that was me. Either way, the silence afterward was suffocating. I didn't stay long. I grabbed my coat, locked the door, tossed my bag into the truck, and drove toward the cabin an hour west of town. The cabin sat tucked between tall pines, a modest one-story structure with a wraparound porch and a chimney that looked more decorative than functional. The gravel driveway was half frozen, crunching under my tires as I pulled in. It was the definition of isolation. Inside, the place smelled like cedar, dust, and the faint ghost of wood smoke. The living room had a stone fireplace, a threadbare rug, and a couch that probably came with the cabin when it was built in the... There was a kitchen the size of a walk-in closet, a bedroom with mismatched sheets, and a bathroom whose faucet screamed when you turned it on. Perfect. Exactly what I needed. No expectations, no witnesses, no tree glaring at me. I lit a fire, poorly, and heated a can of chili over the stove. When it started to bubble, I stood there like a lost bachelor, spoon in hand, wondering if this was the moment I officially became a statistic. A man spending Christmas alone in a cabin in the woods. The beginning of every sad movie or every horror one. After eating, I sat in the armchair by the window and listened to the wind scraping across the roof. The trees swayed like they were trying to speak through the glass. I could have turned on the TV. There was an old box set with rabbit ear antennas. But the idea of watching commercials full of happy families opening presents made my stomach twist. So I sat there instead, doing nothing, being nothing, just sitting with the weight of the words Megan had said, "We're not doing Christmas with you this year." The more I replayed them, the more layers they seemed to have. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about everything we didn't say for years. Every moment I let pass without fixing something. Every moment she pushed me away and I let her, telling myself marriage went through seasons. But seasons weren't supposed to feel like exile. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "You good out there?" I stared at it for a long time, then typed back, "Yeah, just cold." A lie. I wasn't cold. I was numb. Another message came through. "Call if you need company. Merry early Christmas, man." I put the phone down and didn't reply. Mark meant well. He always did. But I didn't have the energy to pretend I was okay for someone else's comfort. And honestly, I didn't want company. I needed space. Not for clarity, but to stop choking on the life that had been shrinking around me for years. At 10 p.m., I finally crawled into the queen-size bed, shoved into the corner of the cabin's only bedroom. The sheets were cold. The pillow smelled like detergent and dust. The silence was thick, tooth. And when you're alone like that, in the middle of the woods, winter pressing against the windows, your mind goes places you didn't plan for. It goes backward. The first Christmas Megan and I spent together, we were broke college kids in a basement apartment, living off ramen noodles, and the thrill of being stupidly in love. She'd surprised me with a $15 watch from a thrift shop and a hand-knit scarf that looked like a toddler. I gave her a silver necklace I'd saved 3 paychecks for. She cried. Not because of the necklace, because of the effort. Back then, effort meant something. Back then, she looked at me like I was the story she wanted to tell 100 times. When did that change? I laid there, staring at the wooden ceiling, letting my breath form little clouds in the cold air. The cabin heater wheezed, struggling. I pulled the blanket tighter. Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it dragged me into dreams I didn't want. Memories, really. Megan laughing in a grocery aisle. Megan holding Mia as a newborn. Megan sitting on my lap the night I told her about my promotion. Kissing me like she believed in me more than I believed in myself. Where did that woman go? And why had she left before I noticed? I woke up before dawn to a cabin colder than a meat locker and a heavy ache across my chest. I threw another log on the fire and watched it catch slowly, reluctantly. Outside, the world was silent, not peaceful, just empty. A thick layer of frost coated the porch railing. My breath fogged in front of me as I stepped outside, boots crunching in the snow. I stood there, hands shoved in my pockets, unsure of what to do next. Christmas Eve, a day traditionally spent making memories. Now, just another day where the clock ticked without meaning. I walked down to the frozen lake behind the cabin. The surface was glassy, reflecting the clouded sky. I picked up a pine cone and threw it across the ice. It skidded until friction finally stopped it. I wished I could stop as easily. That afternoon, I forced myself to call the kids for a video chat. Mia answered first. She was sitting on Nana's couch wearing a Christmas sweater with a reindeer whose nose blinked red. "Daddy," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We made gingerbread houses." Caleb jumped into the frame shouting, "I ate the roof!" I laughed. God, I needed that laugh. Then Megan appeared in the background. Not close, not smiling, just present enough to prove she was still part of the scenery. "Hi," she said. Her voice was polite, neutral, a tone normally reserved for customer service employees. "Hey," I answered. "How's the cabin?" "Fine." "Cold?" "Yeah." Silence. But not the kind that heals, the kind that confirms something is broken. "I'll let you talk to them," she finally said, stepping away. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. I didn't want to ruin the kids' holiday. They didn't deserve that. So I kept my tone light, asked about presents, about cookies, about who was sleeping where. But when the call ended, the silence slammed back down on me. And this time, I didn't fight it, let it settle. Because maybe silence wasn't the enemy. Maybe silence was the truth. That night, I made myself dinner, if you can call scrambled eggs and stale bread dinner, and sat by the fire listening to the wood crackle. Outside, the wind picked up, howling against the cabin. Snow drifted in swirling patterns past the window. I felt small, insignificant, like the world had moved on without me. I was just catching up to the realization. And somewhere in that moment of quiet surrender, I understood something that should have been obvious. Megan hadn't made a sudden decision. She didn't wake up one day and decide Christmas was better without me. She had been easing me out of their life for a long time, one shift at a time, one withheld conversation at a time, one emotionally distant night at a time. Christmas wasn't the first thing she stopped sharing with. It was just the first thing she admitted aloud. Around midnight, the fire dimming, I whispered something to the empty room. "I don't know how to fix this." It wasn't a plea, it was an acknowledgement, because you can't fix something alone. And you can't fix something someone else has already decided isn't worth the effort. When I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion pulling at me, I knew one thing for certain. This Christmas wasn't just a holiday spent alone. It was the beginning of a reckoning I'd been avoiding for too long. The truth was simple, painful, and impossible to escape. My marriage wasn't cracking. It was ending. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to fight for it. The drive back from the cabin felt longer than it should have. Maybe because I wasn't rushing toward anything. There was no warmth waiting for me. No Christmas leftovers to microwave. No arms that missed me. Just a two-story house that still held the shape of my life, but none of the soul. I pulled into the driveway around 4 p.m. on the 27th. The snow had turned to a grimy slush that soaked through the soles of my boots as I stepped out of the truck. The holiday decorations were still up. Wreath on the door, red ribbon around the mailbox. Lights drooping along the gutters like they were exhausted too. I stood there a second before unlocking the front door, as if the handle might burn me. Inside, the heat was on, but the air felt stale. I dropped my duffel by the coat rack. The silence hit me harder than it had at the cabin. There, I chose the quiet. Here, it was abandonment that lingered in the corners. I walked into the living room. The tree was still up. The lights were off, but the fake pine scent hung stubbornly. A few gifts still sat unopened beneath it, probably the ones labeled Dad in Mia's careful handwriting. There was a slight indentation on the couch cushion where she must have curled up watching Christmas movies. The blanket she used was still bunched in the corner. I stood there, watching nothing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was hollow. Later that night, Megan texted, "We'll be home tomorrow afternoon. Can you pick up milk?" Not hey, not hope the cabin wasn't too brutal, just milk. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed, deleted, retyped, deleted again. Then I wrote, sure, one word, like the one I'd said when I walked out the door. So, sure. The language of surrender. I couldn't sleep that night again. I lay in our bed, my bed now, technically, and stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the groans of the old radiator. It used to be her foot I felt brushing mine at night. It used to be her breath I heard, steady and soft. Now, just the distant hum of a house learning to live without noise. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I got up and walked into the garage. I stood there in the cold, barefoot, staring at the mess I'd been promising to organize for 6 months. A snow globe sat on the workbench. One Mia made in 2nd grade, the water slightly yellowed, the glitter clumping like dandruff. Inside it, a tiny plastic family stood smiling the frozen tree. I shook it, watched the snow swirl, then settle. Felt like a metaphor someone would call obvious, and yet, I shook it again. The next day, the sound of the garage door opening was jarring. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have people arrive. The door swung open, and in came Mia, arms full of stuffed animals and art supplies. "Dad," she said brightly, "we made slime." Caleb waddled in behind her, dragging a lumpy duffel bag, already chewing a candy cane. I smiled. "Did you bring me any?" He shook his head, grinning with zero remorse. "I ate them all." Megan followed. She looked tired, or maybe just emotionally hungover. Her face was clean, free of makeup, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she replied. She took off her coat without another word, then walked past me to the laundry room. It was a strange kind of reunion, the kind where people return but never really come back. Over dinner, a lukewarm frozen pizza. The kids recapped their trip. Nana had burned the ham. Olivia's husband bought everyone personalized mugs with their names misspelled. Caleb swore he saw a reindeer hoofprint outside the window, but it was probably just an old boot. Megan didn't speak much. She chewed slowly, sipped her water, and occasionally nodded. I watched her like a stranger at a dinner party, trying to remember if this was how she'd always been and I just didn't notice, or if something had cracked for good while we were apart. After we put the kids to bed, I stayed downstairs. She came back down around 10, blanket draped over her shoulders, holding a half-finished mug of tea. We sat on opposite sides of the couch, not touching, not speaking, just sitting. Finally, I said, "So, are we going to talk about it?" She stared at the TV, which wasn't even. "Talk about what?" "Everything." She let out a sigh. Not annoyed, just exhausted. "I don't know where to start. How about the part where you left me out of Christmas?" She didn't flinch. "It wasn't about leaving you out. It was about survival." I stared at her. "Survival." "Jason," she said, finally looking at me, "do you know how long I've been holding it together? For the kids? For you? Pretending everything was fine while slowly shrinking inside this house?" I blinked. "You think I haven't noticed things were off? You think I haven't been—" "You've seen it, sure," she interrupted. "But you never asked. You never stopped to really see me. Not in a long time." Her voice cracked slightly, and that hurt more than if she'd yelled. "I've been lonely," she whispered, "and I live with someone." My stomach twisted. I wanted to argue, to remind her of all the ways I showed up, financially, logistically, emotionally. But as I opened my mouth, I realized none of it mattered if she didn't feel it. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because I didn't want to fight. Because I didn't want to hurt the kids. Because I thought maybe it would pass. But then Christmas came, and I couldn't fake it anymore." Silence. Then she said, "Did you think about me? At the cabin? All the time. And I kept wondering if this was just a rough patch, or if it's the beginning of the end." She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was soft. "Maybe both." That was the most honest thing she'd said in months. We didn't sleep in the same room that. She went upstairs. I stayed on the couch again. But this time, it wasn't punishment. It was space. Something we both clearly needed. The next morning, I got up before everyone else and went for a walk around the block. The air was sharp and my breath came out in little clouds. I passed house after house with decorations still up, blinking lights and inflatable snowmen sagging slightly from age or wind. I saw dads with snow shovels, moms in bathrobes holding coffee mugs, dogs barking from behind fences. Normal life. And yet, I felt outside of it, like someone who used to belong, but now stood just beyond the window, looking in. By the time I got home, the kids were awake, and Megan was making pancakes. She glanced at me, eyes slightly softer than the night before. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She handed me a plate. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't resolution, but it was something. And for now, that would have to be enough. The first time I felt like a guest in my own house, I laughed. Not out loud, but somewhere inside. This hollow chuckle that rattled around my ribs. It was the Wednesday after the kids got back. Megan was working from home, the kids were at school, and I'd taken the day off. I told her I needed rest. In reality, I just wanted to be around, To observe. Not spy. Observe. We'd been coexisting in this weird limbo. No yelling, no icy silence, just this stiff politeness. The kind that feels more painful than fighting, because at least arguments mean someone still cares enough to argue. I was doing laundry when I saw it, a piece of paper tucked under a laundry basket in our bedroom closet. It was crumpled, looked like one of those to-do lists she scribbled out between coffee sips. But when I opened it, I saw a different list. Things I can't say out loud. I froze. My fingers tightened around the It wasn't a letter. It wasn't even dated. Just a list. Plain, bullet-pointed truth. Some of it was crossed out, which somehow made it worse. Like she'd been editing her own misery. I don't feel seen. He touches me like I'm an obligation. I miss feeling wanted. I feel more myself when he's not home. I've thought about what it would be like to leave. I've imagined telling the kids. I don't think he'd fight for me. I'm tired of pretending we're okay for their sake. That last one wasn't crossed out. I folded the paper carefully, too stunned to be angry. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. Instead, I slipped it into the back of my wallet and walked downstairs like nothing happened. Why? Because I didn't know what reaction would be valid anymore. She'd already told me in her own way. Hurt? That was redundant at this point. Rage? That would only prove her point. So I said nothing, and that silence screamed louder than anything I could have. Later that day, she asked me if I could pick up Mia from ballet. Sure, I said like I always do. I'm the sure guy now, the keep it smooth guy. The guy who, apparently, doesn't fight. On the drive, Mia asked me if I was still mad at Mommy. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Why would I be mad at her? She shrugged. Because you didn't do Christmas with us, and because you sleep on the couch now. I cleared my throat. Sometimes grown-ups need space. Like a timeout? Kind of, I said, but not because anyone's in trouble. She thought about that. When I'm in timeout, I always say, sorry after. I didn't know what to say to that, so I nodded, and we rode the rest of the way home in silence, save for the jingling of her bag and the low hum of holiday music still playing on the radio. That night, after the kids were in bed, Megan and I passed each other in the hallway. I stopped. She stopped. We looked at each other like two people on a train platform heading in opposite directions. I found your list, I said. Her eyes flicked down, then back up. She didn't ask, what list? She knew. She crossed her arms. You were going through my things? No. It fell out of the closet, under the laundry basket. She didn't speak. I didn't read it all, I lied. Still silence. Then, okay, that was it. No apology, no guilt, just acknowledgement. The kind people use when they know they've already started a process, and you've just now caught up to it. I took a breath. Is this a trial separation? And I missed the memo? Her mouth curved, only slightly. Not quite a smirk, not quite a frown. I don't know yet. You don't know if we're separating? I don't know if we're still us. I looked away, trying to ground myself in something solid. My hand found the banister. I would have fought for you, I said quietly. She tilted her head. Then why didn't you? That question echoed in my head the entire night. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many, and none of them good enough. Was it laziness? Pride? Blind trust in time to heal what we wouldn't address? I had thought we were coasting toward stability. She thought we were drowning in indifference. And maybe, terrifyingly, we were both right. A few days later, I needed to print something from her laptop. Megan always left it open on the kitchen counter. I asked first, out of habit more than respect, and she said, yeah, go ahead, not even looking up from her phone. I opened the browser, and her email tab was still logged in. Again, I didn't mean to snoop, but something caught my eye. It wasn't a name. It was a subject line. About the counseling sessions. I clicked it, because I'm human, and because by now, the line between truth and invasion felt paper thin. Turns out she'd been emailing a marriage counselor, alone, for 6 months. She'd gone to 3 sessions without me, said she didn't know how to bring it up, said she wanted help deciding whether it was even worth saving, and the therapist, in the last thread of the email, had gently suggested she bring me in, or walk away entirely. I shut the laptop, heart racing, not with betrayal, but clarity. She wasn't blindsiding. I'd just been walking through this whole marriage with my eyes half closed. That night I brought it up. I saw your email, I said. She didn't ask which one. I would have gone with you, I said, if you'd told me. I didn't think you'd want to. You didn't ask. She sipped her wine. Jason, I've asked for years. Not with words maybe, but with everything else. You wrote a list instead of talking to me, and when I did talk, you didn't hear me. I sat down. I'm hearing you now. She looked at me. Are you? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I was listening for the right thing. We ended the night with no resolution, no promise of therapy, no slam of a door, just this heavy, mutual pause, like we were standing in the hallway of our life, and neither of us knew which door to walk through. The therapist's office smelled like chamomile and old carpet, not a good combination. but better than the sterile lemon-scented places I used to go for physical therapy after I tore my ACL in college. At least, this place didn't pretend to be cheerful. There was a diffuser by the window and a stack of self-help books that all had titles like Reclaiming Us, The Silent Marriage. I didn't touch any of them. I sat on a deep blue couch that was too soft to be comfortable. The kind that makes you sink just enough to feel like you're being swallowed. Megan sat on the other. We weren't touching. We hadn't touched in weeks. Not by accident, not out of comfort, not even in a passing brush of fingers. Touch used to be second nature between us. Now it felt like trespassing. Dr. Holt, our therapist, was a man in his 60s with a white beard and kind eyes. He didn't smile too much, which I appreciated. Some therapists try too hard to put you in. He let the discomfort breathe. Jason, he said after a moment, thanks for coming in. Megan had already been here 3 times alone. I was the guest star in this week's episode. I didn't really know what to expect, I said. That's okay, he replied. We're not here to assign blame. We're here to tell the truth. That sentence hit harder than I expected, because truth, in our house, had become a language neither of us spoke fluently in. He asked how we met. It felt dumb at first, but Megan smiled faintly as she told the story of the college party, the spilled drink, the shared cab ride. I added the part where I pretended I liked jazz because she mentioned Miles Davis. She laughed, for real. And just like that, I remembered who she used to be, who we used to be. Not that it fixed anything, but it scratched a surface that had been painted over too many times. Then he asked the hard one. When did things start to feel off? Megan didn't hesitate. About 3 years ago. I blinked. She nodded. After Caleb was... I was exhausted. Emotionally, physically, everything. And you were there, but not really. I felt my jaw tighten. I was working full time. I was trying to keep things together. I know, she said, and I appreciated it, but it felt like you were building a life around me, not with me. Dr. Holt held up a hand. Jason, what's happening for you hearing that? I shrugged. I guess I didn't realize she felt that way. I thought I was doing the right thing, providing, and that's important. Dr. Holt nodded. But it sounds like Megan was needing something different. I looked at her. She didn't look angry. She looked tired of being the only one saying it out loud. I needed connection, she said, not just bills paid and trash taken. I stared down at my hands. My wedding ring was still on. Hers was not. How long have you been thinking about leaving? I asked. She didn't answer right away, long enough to make the silence loud. Almost a year, she said finally. A year. A full year of going to bed beside someone who was already halfway out the door. The rest of the session blurred. Dr. Holt guided us through reflection, asked questions that felt like scalpels, sharp, precise, meant to expose what was festering. We talked about emotional labor, about how I'd started shutting down when things got too complicated, how she started managing our life like a business just to keep it functional, how we both quietly resented each other for exactly what we had become. Megan said something that stuck with me. I didn't stop loving him. I just stopped feeling like he saw me as a person. I became an extension of his life, not a partner in it. I wanted to argue. I really did. But I couldn't, because if I was honest, truly honest, I had let routine become my excuse for disengagement. I used exhaustion to dodge effort, and I thought being steady was enough. It wasn't. Not for her. Maybe not even. After the session, we drove home in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't get out right away. I don't hate you, Jason. I looked over at her. I know, but I don't know if I can do this again. Not the way it's been. I nodded slowly. Do you want to try? She hesitated. Do you? That question echoed in my head for days, because I didn't know anymore. I knew I didn't want to lose my kids. I knew I didn't want to sell the house. I knew I didn't want to be alone. But did I want her? Did I want us, even in its most salvageable form? Or did I just want the memory of what we were before it all got too real? We agreed to go back, not as a couple trying to fix things, but as 2 people trying to figure out if there was anything left to fix. Over the next 2 weeks, we went to 2 more sessions. Each one peeled back more layers. Resentments we'd never voiced, habits we'd built around avoiding conflict, expectations we never clarified. Dr. Holt said something during the second session that hit me like a freight train. Love doesn't die from betrayal, it dies from neglect. That one stayed with me, because I hadn't cheated. I hadn't screamed or slammed doors or disappeared for days, but I had withdrawn. I'd stopped checking in emotionally. I'd stopped asking her how she was really doing. I'd stopped flirting, stopped planning, stopped trying. And somewhere in all of that, being a good man, I had forgotten how to be a good partner. The night after our 3rd session, we ended up sitting at the kitchen table after the kids had gone to bed. No phones, no distractions, just 2 mugs of tea and the space between us. I wrote you a letter, Megan said quietly. She slid a folded page across the table. I opened it slowly. It wasn't angry. It wasn't desperate. It was honest. She wrote about how she missed laughing, how she missed the version of me that used to hold her hand without thinking, how she felt like she'd been grieving a version of our marriage for so long that it became normal. And she asked me something. Do you still believe in us? Or are we just roommates with history? I folded the paper and didn't speak for a long time. Then I said, I don't know how to answer that. Not yet. She nodded. I just needed to ask. That night, I didn't sleep on the couch. I didn't sleep in our bed either. I slept in Caleb's room, on the floor beside his bed. Not because I was hiding, but because I needed a reminder of what we'd built. Even if the foundation was cracked, even if the walls were thin, there was still a house here, and maybe, just maybe, there was still a home. The morning after I slept in Caleb's room, I woke up with a crick in my neck and Legos stuck to my lower back. I'd rolled over onto a whole minefield of sharp plastic dreams. He was already awake, curled up in his bed with his blanket halfway off and his thumb in his mouth. The kid always slept like he was mid-battle, one leg on the wall, a stuffed dinosaur over his head. I stood up slowly, bones creaking like I was twice my age, and pulled the blanket. He stirred, but just let out a long sigh like the whole world. Sometimes their ability to just exist in the... No guilt about yesterday, no dread of tomorrow. I, on the other hand, carried both like unpaid bills in my back pocket. That afternoon, I went for a drive. No destination in mind, just the open road, a gas station coffee in the cup holder, and too many thoughts bouncing around in my skull like loose screws in a blender. I ended up outside the old high school. Not mine, Megan's. It was stupid. I don't even know what drew me there. Nostalgia? Curiosity? Or maybe I was just trying to retrace the parts of her life I hadn't really listened to back when she first shared them. We'd passed by it once years ago, and she pointed to a tree behind the bleachers. I had my first kiss under that tree, she'd said with a grin. Back then, I joked, poor guy must have peaked early. But I didn't ask her what it meant to her. I didn't ask if it was awkward or sweet, or if she ever thought of that moment when we kissed for the first time. I didn't ask because I didn't know how to be curious about her past without feeling threatened by it. And that, I realized, was the first brick in the wall Dr. Holt had asked me during our last session, when I first learned to hide what I felt. I told him I didn't know. I played it off, shrugged. But driving now, I thought back to my father. He was a good man, provider, never laid a hand on us. But affection, vulnerability, those were foreign languages in our house. Emotions were fine, as long as they were kept in check. Feelings were like leaks. You patched them quickly before they flooded the whole place. I remembered once, when I was 11, I cried because I lost a baseball game. My dad said, "You can cry in the dugout, son, but not on the field." I swallowed that lesson like mouthwash. Useful, bitter, and burned a little going down, and I kept swallowing it. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every wound I didn't know how to name. By the time I met Megan, I'd mastered the art of containment. I could be charming, attentive, even romantic, but deep emotional exposure, that was off limits. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to show it without feeling weak. And somewhere along the way, Megan stopped asking me to try. She adjusted, adapted, became the emotional caretaker of the household while I stayed wrapped up in my own sturdy, silent shell. She didn't marry a monster. She married a locked door. That night, back home, I started something I hadn't done in years. I wrote. Not emails, not work memos, not to-do lists. I wrote a letter. To Megan. No grand declaration, no apologies designed to earn forgiveness, just the truth. I wrote about the tree by her high school, about how I should have asked what that kiss meant. I wrote about my dad, about the time he told me emotions make men unreliable. I wrote that I didn't know how to fight for her because I never learned how to fight with vulnerability. I told her I missed her, not just the version she used to be, but the version I never got to know because I didn't make space for her to be more than a wife and a mom. I left the letter on her nightstand, didn't say a word, just let it sit there like a seed and hoped it found soil. A few days later, she brought it up. We were in the kitchen. I was making grilled cheese for the kids, because even in a near-dead marriage, people still need to eat. And she walked in, leaned against the fridge and said, "You wrote that at the table, didn't you?" I looked up. Yeah, I could tell. Your jaw gets tight when you're concentrating. I smiled. Did you read it? She nodded, twice. And, she took a deep breath. It's the first time I felt like you were talking to me in a long time. Not performing, not fixing, just talking. We stood there in that silence again. But this time, it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like permission. Thank you, she said quietly. And I realized that thank you wasn't just for the letter, it was for trying. Therapy continued. We got uglier before we got better. There were sessions where she cried and I froze, where I yelled and she shut down. But we kept going. We started calling it renovation, not repair, because repair implies you're restoring something that used to work. But renovation? That's tearing down old walls, ripping up floors, finding mold where you swore it was clean. Renovation is chaos before its beauty, and that's where we were, still standing in the dust. But now we were holding the same blueprint. The kids noticed, too. Not everything, but little things. We started eating at the table again. We started asking each other about our days, and actually listening. One night Mia said, "You two are talking more." We looked at each other. Megan smiled. "Yeah, we're working on that." "Good," Mia said. "You're better when you're not quiet." She was right. We were better when we weren't quiet, even if what we had to say was hard. One night, after the kids were asleep and the dishwasher hummed in the background, Megan sat beside me on the couch. Not across. Beside. She didn't say anything at first. Then, "Do you still love me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," I said, "but I think I'm only now learning how to show it." She nodded. "That's fair." Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, she leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't move, didn't speak, just let it be. A small, fragile moment. The kind you don't recognize as important until years later when someone asks, "When did things start getting better?" And you think, that night, on the couch, when she leaned in again, January rolled in like a drunk uncle, loud, unpredictable, and knocking things over. Megan's dad was turning 70, and her family had decided on a surprise party. That meant all of us driving down to Lancaster for a Saturday night surrounded by folding chairs, lukewarm lasagna, and relatives who loved to ask uncomfortable questions. It was the first event Megan and I had attended together in months. We hadn't exactly advertised our situation to the family. People noticed, but in most families, noticing and acknowledging are two very different sports. The kids were excited, Mia especially. She had drawn a glittery card that said, "Happy 70th Papa," in green marker, and wrote her name in cursive 6 times like a nervous signature artist. I watched her bounce around the living room, and for a second, I forgot the weight hanging between Megan and me. Just for a moment, I remembered we still shared something good. These two little people who made chaos look like magic. The drive was quiet. Not the cold kind of quiet, just still. Like we were both bracing for something. We hadn't fought in weeks. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's a ceasefire. Megan wore a navy blue sweater I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was up, earrings small and simple. She looked light. Or maybe I just hadn't looked closely in a while. "You look nice," I said. She glanced at me, surprised. "Thanks." Mia chimed in from the back seat. "You do look pretty, Mommy." Megan smiled. "Thank you, babe." Caleb, never one to miss a moment, added, "Daddy, your face is boring." Megan laughed. I laughed too. It was a real one. Small victories. The party was held in a church basement that smelled like varnish and reheated meatballs. Streamers sagged between fluorescent lights, and the buffet table looked like a carb lover's fever dream. Baked ziti, mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, breadsticks, more breadsticks. We'd barely stepped inside before we were swallowed by the crowd. Megan's aunt hugged her so hard I thought one of them might pass out. I stayed behind, letting her have her moment. Then came the shoulder pats. The cousin nods. The, "Jason, long time, man," from people who forgot the last time they saw me was at a funeral. Within 20 minutes, Megan was off chatting with her sister. The kids were running around with frosting on their faces, and I was stuck near the drinks table with a plastic cup of flat Coke and a Smile I'd rented for the evening. Then came her cousin, Tyler. The guy was in his early 40s. Looked like he'd been cast as the fun divorced uncle in a Hallmark movie. Sport coat, 5 o'clock shadow, way too much cologne. He slid next to me with a grin. "So, you and Meg, still doing the suburban thing?" I nodded. "Trying." He chuckled. "Yeah, I hear you. Marriage is wild, huh? All these expectations. Makes you miss being single sometime." I looked at him. "Not really." He shrugged. "You're a better man than me." Then he looked across the room. "She looks good tonight. Real good." It took me a second to realize he was talking about Megan. My jaw clenched. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. He raised his plastic cup. "Here's to surviving adulthood." I didn't toast him. I just walked away. I found Megan by the dessert table, laughing with her sister Olivia. When she saw me, her smile dipped for just a second. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just needed air." She didn't push. That somehow made it worse. I used to be the air. Now I was the tension. The surprise moment happened at 6 Gauss on the dot. The lights dimmed. The family yelled, "Surprise!" like they were trying to summon ghosts. And her dad entered with the exact face of a man who'd just come in for a quiet evening and was instead hit by a cannon of attention. He handled it well, gave a short speech, hugged everyone twice, even made a joke about switching to soft foods at 70. Megan beamed, and for a second, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who adored her father and dreamed of the kind of marriage she thought he had with her mom. I wondered if she still believed in that version of love, or if she'd filed it under fiction, right next to Santa and honest politicians. After cake, I stepped outside. The cold slapped me like it had been waiting. I leaned against the brick wall and breathed in deep, trying to push Tyler's words out of my brain. She looks good tonight. Real good. Asshole. But the problem wasn't what he said. The problem was my reaction. Because the truth, the ugly truth I didn't want to admit, was that he wasn't wrong. Megan did look good, and part of me wondered how long other men had been noticing. While I'd been too busy not noticing anything, Megan came out a few minutes later, wrapped in her coat, arms crossed. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just needed a break." She nodded. Then, "Tyler said something to you, didn't he?" I looked at her. "How'd you know?" "He said something to me too." I stiffened. "What?" She exhaled sharply. "He said, if things ever fall apart, you know where to find me." I wanted to punch the wall. Instead I said, "You gonna tell your aunt her son's a creep?" Megan smiled bitterly. "Please. They'd just say I was being dramatic." We stood in silence. Then I said it. "Did you ever think about it?" She looked at me. "About him?" "God, no. No, I mean, someone else. Anyone." She looked down, then up. "Of course I did." I nodded, swallowing the burn in my chest. "Did you?" She asked. "No," I said, then added, "but I thought about what it would be like to just disappear." She nodded again. "Me too." There it was. Not scandal, not betrayal, just weariness, shared and spoken. We didn't go back inside right away. We stood there, side by side, two people in the cold who once built a life out of fire. "I hated that it took a creep like Tyler to make me feel seen," she said. "I hated that I didn't notice you needed to." We looked at each other, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Not love, not yet, but recognition. On the drive home, the kids fell asleep in the back seat, their mouths slightly open, heads tilted like sunflowers leaning toward dreams. I reached out and took Megan's hand. She looked at me, surprised. Then she squeezed back. Nothing was fixed, but something, and sometimes, that's where you start again. The call came on a Thursday, 2:14 a.m. No one calls with good news at 2:14 in the morning. Megan's phone lit up on the nightstand. I was half asleep on the edge of the bed. I'd been sleeping there for weeks now. Close, but never touching. She groaned and reached for it, blinking at the screen. Then she bolted upright. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer, just tapped the screen and said, "Hello?" Then I watched the color drain from her face. Her mother had collapsed in the bathroom. Heart-related, they thought. Maybe a stroke. Paramedics had taken her to a hospital 2 towns over. Megan's hands shook as she got dressed, not panicked, but robotic, like her mind had leapt 20 steps ahead while her body lagged behind. "I'm driving," I said. She didn't argue. 10 minutes later, we were on the road, the sky black and silent. The kids stayed behind with the neighbor, still asleep, unaware that their world had tilted. Neither of us spoke. It wasn't the cold silence of resentment. It was the sacred quiet of grief in transit. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and second chances. Megan's sister Olivia was already in the waiting room, face puffy and mascara smudged. She stood and hugged Megan so tight I thought they'd merge. "She's stable," Olivia whispered. "They're running more tests." Megan nodded, said nothing, sat down beside her, hands clasped tight like she was trying to hold herself together. I stood there awkwardly for a beat, then went to grab coffee. Not for me, for her, because I couldn't fix hearts, or strokes, or broken marriages, but I could offer something warm. Hours passed in fits and starts. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped in background rhythms. The clock forgot how to move. I watched Megan, really watched her. Her jaw clenched when doctors entered her leg bounced when they didn't. At one point, she looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot but dry. "I don't know what I'll do if she stopped." "You're not going to lose her," I said, but I didn't know that. I just knew she needed to hear it. By noon, they moved her mother to a recovery room. Minor heart attack. No permanent damage, they said, but she'd need surgery soon. Megan finally exhaled, and when she did, it came out like a sob, halfway swallowed. Olivia handled most of the talking. Megan just nodded and leaned into my shoulder. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't a signal. It was instinct, and I didn't move. Back home that night, after Olivia insisted on staying at the hospital, Megan curled up on the couch, blanket around her shoulders like armor. The kids had drawn cards, smiley hearts and crooked flowers for Nana. Megan read them all, silently. Then she said, "I thought I had more time." She wasn't just talking about her mom. I sat across from her. "You do," I said. She shook her head. "You never think it's the last time, last birthday, last normal conversation, last moment where they're fully them, until it is." And again, I knew she meant more than just her mother. She meant us. The us we used to be. The people who danced in the kitchen and argued about whether to get a real tree for Christmas. We never had a memorial for. We just let them fade quietly. The next day, she didn't go to work. She made waffles instead. The real kind. Scratch-made, crispy on the outside, soft inside. The kind she only made on birthdays and snow days when the world felt soft and slow. We sat at the table together, the kids oblivious to everything except syrup and cartoons. She looked at me and said, "I'm not okay." I nodded. "I didn't think you were. And I don't know how to get back to okay." I hesitated, then said, "Maybe we don't get back. Maybe we build something new." Her lip quivered. New sounds exhausting. I half smiled. So does pretending. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "I'm scared." "Me too." "Of what?" "Of doing all this work and still losing you." Her eyes softened. "Jason," she said, "you've already lost parts of me. We both have." Silence again. "But maybe," she continued, "if we're honest about what's still here, we can figure out what's worth keeping." That night we sat in bed, together, for the first time in weeks. Not touching, not talking, just breathing in the same space without tension. I told her about my dad, about how hard it was to unlearn what he taught me about manhood and emotion, about how I'd built emotional bunkers inside myself, thinking it made me strong. She told me about the letter her mom wrote her at 16, the one she keeps in her nightstand, the one she never showed me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't movie montage healing, but it was real, and real was better than perfect. 2 days later, Megan's mom came home. Megan cooked dinner that night. Roast chicken, her mother's recipe. The smell filled the house with something warm and old and sacred. After the kids went to bed, we sat in the kitchen. 2 glasses of wine, a plate of leftover cookies between us. She looked up from her glass and said, "You're trying." It wasn't a compliment, it was a fact, and it meant the world. "Do you think," I asked, "we can really come back from this?" "I think," she said slowly, "if we treat every day like it might be the last one we get to try." That was the first time in months I felt like I could breathe without bracing. People talk about big moments fixing things, but it's not the grand gestures. It's the 2 a.m. hospital drives, the waffles, the honesty, the tiny moments of mercy between people who've hurt each other but still show up. We hadn't been alone in a hotel room together in 2 years. The last time, it was for Megan's cousin's wedding in Ohio. We shared a queen bed, ordered too much room service, and fell asleep mid-movie. I remember her toes brushing against mine under the sheets like a whisper. This time was different. This time it was intentional. No event, no family, no kids, no distractions. Just us, and whatever was still between us that hadn't been named yet. Megan had suggested it. Just a weekend, she'd said. Somewhere close. Not to fix everything, just to breathe. I agreed. Mostly because I didn't want to be the guy who said no. And maybe deep down, I wanted to believe we still had something worth getting away for. We booked a small lodge by a lake 2 hours out. Wood cabins, a fireplace. One of those disconnect to reconnect kind of places. The drive was quiet, comfortable-ish. We listened to old playlists, Fleetwood Mac, The National, some Jason Isbell. Megan hummed a little. I pretended not to notice. Every so often, she'd point at something out the window. "That diner looks cute. Look at that old truck." Each time, I nodded, made a note to sound more enthusiastic next time, and wondered when we became tourists in each other's company. The lodge was quaint, code for small and slightly musty. Our room had 2 armchairs, a fireplace that worked most of the time, and a bed that creaked like it was trying to confess something. Still, it was ours for 2 nights. We unpacked in silence. I folded my shirts. She arranged her books. At one point, we both reached for the same drawer and our hands touched. She flinched. I pretended not to notice. Dinner that night was at the lodge restaurant, candlelit, rustic, too many antlers on the walls. Megan ordered salmon. I got a burger. We shared a bottle of wine like 2 people trying to remember how to be. Halfway through the meal, she said, "You haven't made a joke yet." I looked up. "About what?" "Anything. You always make jokes when you're nervous." I smiled. "I haven't decided if I should be nervous." She tilted her head. "You are." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I admitted. "Me too." We both laughed, softly. It was awkward, but it was something. Back in the room, we sat by the fire. No TV, no phones, just the hiss of flames, and the groaning of the old bed frame as we both avoided sitting on. "I forgot how quiet it gets," Megan said. "I forgot how bad I am at small talk when there's no Wi-Fi." She smiled. "That's because you never really did small talk. You just asked big questions and made bad puns." I looked at her. "You miss that?" She nodded. "Sometimes." There it was again. Sometimes. The distance between sometimes and always used to be a pebble. Now it was a canyon. Later that night we got into bed, backs turned but close. "I don't know what you expect this weekend to do," I said quietly. "I don't either," she replied. "But I wanted to see if we still feel anything. It's just us." Silence. Then, "And do we?" She didn't answer, and neither did I. The next morning, we went for a hike. Megan packed snacks like we were going to summit Everest. 2 granola bars, trail mix, and a tiny first aid kit I didn't know we owned. We walked for an hour, mostly in silence, until we reached a cliffside that overlooked the... She sat on a rock, pulling her hoodie tighter. I sat beside her, both of us staring out at the water like it had something important to tell us. Do you ever feel like we're pretending? She asked. I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. Yeah, I said. All the time. Then why do we keep doing it? Because it's easier than being honest. She looked at me, and I finally said it. I'm scared you don't love me any. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I do, she whispered, but it's not the same. I know. I miss missing you. That one cut deep, because so did I. On the way back down the trail we fought. Not loud, not cruel, but sharp. She brought up how I used to shut down every time she was upset. I brought up how she never told me how deeply she felt neglected. She said she was tired of feeling like the emotional adult in the relationship. I said I was tired of always feeling like a failure. We stopped walking, just stood there, out of breath, looking at each other like we'd forgotten what we came here for. I don't want to go back to how it was, she said. I'm not sure I can be who you need, I said. Maybe I just need you to try. I am trying. I know, she said. But is it for us, or just to stop the bleeding? That one hurt, because I didn't know. Back in the cabin, we didn't speak for an hour. She read a book. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the wood. Eventually, I stood up, walked to her, and sat on the floor in front of her chair. I don't know how to be what you want, I said. She closed the book. I don't want perfect, she said. I want presence. I want effort. I want to feel like I'm not the only one checking the temperature of this marriage. I nodded. I can do that. Can you do it when it's boring? When nothing's wrong? When it's just life? That was the question. Not about dramatic gestures or getaway, but showing up when nothing demands it. Yeah, I said. I think I can. She put her hand on my shoulder, and we stayed like that for a while. No fireworks, no closure, just contact. That night we slept closer. Still no sex, no grand romantic reunion, but our feet touched. And for once, neither of us pulled away. Somewhere between Megan's mother's recovery and our trip to the cabin, things started to not heal exactly, but breathe. The air in the house wasn't thick anymore. Dinner didn't feel like a truce meeting. We hadn't solved anything, but we were trying in small, stubborn ways. Little gestures, half-efforts that somehow added up to something more meaningful than they looked. Then Mia asked me the question that cracked it all open. It was a Tuesday night. She was brushing her teeth, standing on that pink stool with the faded unicorn D. I was helping Caleb with a sock war. He'd declared a battle between the clean and dirty pairs, and apparently my laundry basket was the front line. Mia turned, toothbrush hanging from her mouth, and said, "Daddy, why don't you laugh like you used to?" I paused. What do you mean? You used to laugh like loud, big. You did that face where your eyes squint and your mouth opens so wide. Like when you and Mommy used to watch those silly cooking shows. She demonstrated the face. It was spot on. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. Caleb naturally shouted, "Daddy's face is broken," and launched a sock at me. But Mia just stared at me, toothbrush in hand, waiting for an answer. I didn't have one. Not a real one. Not one she'd understand. So I said, "Maybe I forgot how." She nodded, matter of fact. "Well, you should remember. It was funny." Then she rinsed and skipped off like she hadn't just emotionally roundhouse kicked her dad in the soul. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't really want, and opened the notes app on my phone. I scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. Old grocery lists. Half-started poems. A birthday speech I wrote for Megan 5 years ago and never gave because we got into a fight that. And then this one line, buried deep, I want to feel like more than a paycheck with a pulse. I'd written it during a layover in Dallas. I remember the flight. I remember the overpriced sandwich. I remember thinking it was just a joke. But now, years later, it felt like a confession I hadn't even realized I made. When Megan walked into the kitchen, I didn't close the app. I didn't hide anything. She poured herself water, paused, and said, "You okay?" I showed her the note. She read it, then sat down across from me. "You wrote this a long time ago." "I know. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't know I felt that way until I read it again." She sipped her water, then said, "I always saw you as more than that." I looked at her. "Did you ever tell me?" Her face softened. "I guess I assumed you knew." And there it was. Assumption. The slowest poison in any relationship. We talked for hours that night. Not about bills, not about the kids, not about therapy homework or scheduling. We talked about us. About who we were before we became two managers of the same household. I told her I felt invisible, not because she ignored me, but because I stopped showing up as someone who wanted to be seen. I told her I missed making her laugh. She said, "You used to be funny," and we both laughed, for real. She told me she missed feeling chosen, not needed, not scheduled, but wanted. I didn't have some perfect reply. I just nodded and said, "Yeah, me too." The next day, I picked the kids up from school. They climbed into the back seat, backpacks swinging like wrecking balls. "Can we go to the park?" Caleb asked before I even pulled away from the curb. "Homework first," I said. "Then we'll see." He groaned like I'd canceled Christmas. Mia, more quietly, said, "Did you remember yet?" Remember what? How to laugh. I looked in the rearview mirror. She wasn't joking. She wasn't teasing. She was checking. And something about that, about being held accountable by your 8-year-old daughter, hit different. I smiled, working on it. That night, I asked Megan if she wanted to watch that old cooking show again. She laughed. With the guy who wears the stupid hats? Exactly. We sat on the couch. We watched. And when the chef accidentally dropped a chicken, and the narrator said, "Well, there goes dinner," I laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a polite exhale. A real laugh. The kind that shook something loose inside me. The kind Mia would have recognized. Megan looked over and smiled. There you are. It didn't fix everything. Laughter doesn't glue broken things back together. But it reminded me that I was still in here somewhere. That the version of me Megan fell in love with, the goofy, curious, open-hearted guy, hadn't died. He'd just gone into hiding. Under stress. Under disappointment. Under years of playing the role of a man who always had it together. Later, I found myself writing again. Not just notes or journal entries, but memories. Stories. One started like this. The day I almost forgot how to laugh was also the day I remembered who I wanted to be. Corny? Sure, but honest. And that was something. It rained on the day we decided. Not a dramatic cinematic storm, just a soft, persistent drizzle that soaked into the world quietly, like it wasn't trying to wash anything, just remind you it was still there. I watched it from the living room window, coffee in hand, slippers too worn down to be comfortable. Megan was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she loaded the dishwasher. And for a second, if someone had paused that frame, they would have thought everything was normal. But nothing about us was normal anymore. Not broken, exactly. Not repaired either. More like under renovation. Still half dismantled. And there, in the middle of it, was the question we hadn't answered yet. Now what? We had been through therapy, through fights, through tears, through long nights of sleeping back-to-back and mornings of forced civility over pancakes. We had unpacked 10 years of silence in 12 sessions. We had seen the ugliest parts of each other, the petty, the tired, the shut down, and the shutout. And still, we weren't done. Because marriage, as it turns out, doesn't end with an explosion. It ends with choices. Not just the choice to stay or go, but the choice to begin again without pretending you ever fell apart. It was a Saturday. No plan. The kids were at Olivia's. A whole day alone, for the first time since the hospital visit. No emergencies, no distraction, just us. Megan poured her coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. She looked tired. Not in the physical sense. In the soul deep, I've been carrying this too long kind of way. I don't know what the right thing is anymore, she said. I nodded. Me neither. People keep saying, fight for your marriage, but they never tell you what happens if the fight just becomes your life. I stared at my coffee. I think we stopped fighting each other, I said. But we haven't figured out how to fight together. She exhaled. Exactly. Then came the hardest part. She asked, do you still want to be married to me? Not, do you love me? Not, do you want to try? Not, are we okay? But that specific question, a contract, a choice, a promise. I sat there for too long, and we both knew it. Then I said, I don't want to be married to the version of us we've been, but I think I still want to be married to you. Her eyes watered. She nodded slowly. I feel the same. That was the turning point. Not a dramatic declaration. Not a big kiss in the rain. Just the truth. The unvarnished kind. We were tired, hurt, changed, but we weren't done. The rest of that day, we did something we hadn't done in years. We cleaned the garage. Together. And I mean really cleaned it. We pulled out bins of old baby clothes, broken toys, boxes of college notebooks, electronics with cords that hadn't been plugged in since Obama's first term. We laughed at our hoarding tendencies. We fought over whether to keep the busted espresso machine. We found a photo album from our first year together, full of blurry selfies, messy apartment pics, tickets to concerts we couldn't afford. Megan held one up. This was the night we made out in the parking lot for 45 minutes and missed the whole movie. I grinned. Best non-movie of my life. She smiled, and for a second, I saw it. Us. The real us. Still under there. That night, we made dinner together. No phones, no kids, no TV. Just two people chopping vegetables, arguing about garlic ratios, sharing the same counter space. After dinner, she turned to me and said, if we're doing this again, we need new rules. I agreed. So we wrote them down. Rules for version 2.0. No silent resentment. If something bothers us, we say it. Without performance or passive aggression. We take turns asking real questions, not just how was your day, but how are you really feeling today? We don't keep score, not about chores, not about who apologized first, none of that. We hug once a day, minimum, even if it's awkward. We choose each other, even when it's easier not to. She added a sixth. No pretending everything is fine when it's not. I added a seventh. Laugh, loudly, even when it feels ridiculous. We didn't sign the paper, we didn't frame it. We just taped it to the fridge, right under Mia's spelling test and Caleb's drawing of a dog that looked like a microwave with legs. And every day since, we've tried to live by it. Some days we fail, some days we forget, but most days, we try. Megan started wearing her wedding ring again, not to prove a point, just because she said it felt good to wear it on her terms now. I started writing again, little essays, observations, even a letter to Mia about the day she was born, which I'll probably give her when she's 18 and too cool to read it. We're not the same couple we were 5 years ago. We're not even the same people we were last year, and that's okay. We stopped chasing a fantasy version of ourselves. We started building something new, not better, not worse, just real. And every night before we turn off the lights, Megan reaches for my hand. She squeezes once. Sometimes I squeeze back, sometimes I don't, but she never lets go, and neither do I.